Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Speaker.
Now recognize Mr. Meehan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Fugate, thank you for not only your time here testifying today, but your long service in the first responder community. I think America has taken a new awareness of the significance and importance, and I think, of course, we all had our eyes opened on September 11th. There's so many aspects of that, but to me, one of the things, having served in the aftermath as a federal prosecutor, and as many observed, it was the remarkable difficulty of communications in the aftermath of that incident. Naturally, the unanticipated impact of what would happen once the interoperability of our traditional systems and the communications from towers to transmission lines went down. So I think we as a nation went back to the bucket brigades. In effect, at that point in time, it was ham operators, radio operators that were establishing central communications for our system. The frustration is that a few years later, we saw the same thing duplicated in Katrina, in which, once again, although there was a suggestion that we had interoperability and we'd be better prepared, there was physical damage done to towers, and in the immediate aftermath, the inability to communicate. What have we done in that time so that if we have a similar kind of incident, which we can anticipate the infrastructure is going to be significantly damaged, we can have real-time communications capacity that's better than the bucket brigades of the ham operators?
Well, sir, as it goes to the question of what's different, several things have improved and changed. I think one of the things is we are responsible as part of Homeland Security for doing disaster emergency communications. If the area of impact has lost their infrastructure and needs to have equipment brought in, we have the capability to bring in and set up communications and work across a wide range of systems to get initial interoperability back up. But that means it has to get to the area. So there is a delay from the initial impact.
What kind of delay would that be, and how significant is the communications capacity once it comes in?
It's not more. It really just comes back to is drive time to physically get in, or do we fly the kits in? So it's just the transport time, and these are resources scattered across the country to get them in. But probably more important is the investment that's been made in interoperability. As an example, in Congressman's long state, we had participated in national level exercise, which was an earthquake a week before the tornadoes hit. And at that time, the governor was demonstrating their statewide radio system, which had used federal dollars to develop interoperability. And we didn't know a week later, or not even a week later, they would be using that very system in Joplin when that city got hit to provide backup communication to responders because of the impacts there.
But are they still built again on existing infrastructure like cell towers and other kinds of transmission lines that roll through?
Well, again, when you look at the public safety, those are generally government-owned systems, and so we bring the system to augment that. We also work very closely with the private sector through the National Communications System to get those systems back up. Sometimes it's damaged infrastructure. A lot of times it's not only infrastructure, it's bandwidth to provide a communication. So in the initial hours, our first focus will always be on the public safety responders, getting them back up. But one of the other things we've learned that's also important is getting the public back up, and that's where the private sector really has, I think, made improvements in their ability to bring in mobile units, get communications up, and add capacity for cellular communication, wireless communications in areas.
Well, that's critical, and that's one of the things. I'm asking these questions for a variety of reasons, but not least of which I have had the opportunity to visit within my own district a group called the Regent Corporation, who has been at the cutting edge of communications for the military, and they've had the ability, of course, in areas in which there's armed conflict, to quickly be able to enable there to be communications. It's a system called breadcrumbs. The concern I asked them about if they've had communications with FEMA. They did. They talked to FEMA 6 weeks before Katrina and were told, we have all the communications we need. And then, obviously, we found out the inability to do that. So how do we keep certain that we are accessing the latest technology and capacity that's available so that we know that we can find communications capacity in that critical window, not the 48 hours it's going to take to drive or fly it in from, but in those 2 or 3 hours where people may be at peril?
Well, I think, again, it was one of the issues the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act established was we had need to do more than just talk about interoperability, provide grant funding. We need to have states divide their plans. We need to have the deployable capability, which was assigned to FEMA for the disaster emergency communications. And we continue to look at how do you start using things that, again, we still face the fact that most smartphones have more capability than a lot of our public safety radios. So as we continue to transition to bringing that into the public safety world, how do we continue to enhance wireless networking, both for the public safety as well as the public?
But we know, and that was and I'll close out, Mr. Chairman, in a second, but that was the great frustration was simply in New York, the wireless network being overloaded with family members trying to contact other family members. And so, we've got a very, very precarious network in the immediate aftermath. Well, thank you, Mr. Fugate, for all of your work and hard work in putting that together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Long?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd first like to thank